r/AskReddit, what's the most spectacular way you've seen someone fuck up at work? I'm a cashier in a pharmacy. Anyone that works in the medical field knows that patient privacy is super important. When a patient picks up their prescription, we have to scan the receipt of their medication to the computer. This is unique to each individual prescription, so if it does not match, we accidentally grab someone else's medication. It catches mistakes before we make them. The alternative to scanning is typing the recipe number into the computer. This doesn't guarantee a match. Only comparing the number on the receipt with the number on the computer will work if the barcode won't work. One day, while I was on break, someone came in looking for a prescription. The girl covering my post clearly confirmed the date of birth, but grabbed someone else's prescription by mistake. Two people with the same last name were next to each other in the fridge. But she didn't scan the receipt, so her mistake was not caught. She typed the number she saw on the computer, had the person sign for their medication, and gave them someone else's medication. Not 20 minutes later, the patient calls and tells us that what he received was not intended for him. We of course apologized, and he came back to get his medication. The sad thing is, once something leaves the store, it cannot be returned. We can dispose it, but we cannot use it for someone else, even if it is sealed. This particular medication cost $4,000, and we had to throw it out. This plus the breach of privacy did not stand well, and she was written up for her mistake. She doesn't use cash much anymore, and is confined to packaging. Edit. We had another incident recently that didn't get off the ground as far as I know. All I know is that both parties were called, and that was that. For those who don't know, all prescriptions have to go through the pharmacist or a registered technician before they can be released. This is to ensure it's going to the right person, and that it was filled according to the doctor's requests. It also allows the pharmacist to check for any odd doses, dose changes, potential interactions, or allergies. This pharmacist filled 2 prescriptions for 2 different people, but they were both getting the same brand of birth control. She mixed up the bags, putting patient A's receipt with patient B's pills and vice versa. I served the girl, and since the receipts matched, had no issues. She went on and caught the mistake the next day. Nothing was traced back to me, since it was a pharmacist error. Cashiers aren't really supposed to be digging through bags, unless requested by a patient, so I wouldn't have caught it. This literally happened last Thursday. New teacher at the daycare, working in the baby room. Here's her list of what made everyone dislike her. She told many aides she didn't like babies. While working in the baby room too, she refused to change diapers, burp the babies, or even feed them in high chairs. She just sat in the same chair and refused to do anything. She wouldn't train new aides or help them in the room. She did not care about bonding with the children or even her coworkers. But her biggest fuck up was that she let a baby roll off the changing table. According to my coworkers, she simply walked away from this child and left him there, and he rolled off and hit the floor. Double apparently is that she has a history of this where other teachers and aides had to be like WTF, watch the baby and keep a hand on them at all times on the changing table. The only reason she took the job was because, and I quote, "Daddy won't give me spending money with my graduation present, so I'm just gonna do this until July and then quit." Her grad present was a 2-week trip to Hawaii. She got fired for negligence, so good riddance. The baby is fine and the parents aren't suing or anything, and I only think this is because the other teacher, who was feeding the new infant, was there and they trust her heavily, and now she'd never, or their son directly in harm's way. Good riddance. Went through phone screening for life insurance with a company contracted through my carrier. The woman interviewing me was new and didn't seem to be getting her job. I'll have worked as a trainer myself, so I tried to make her at ease and lighten the mood. I have Ehlers-Danlos type 3rd, so when answering the screening questions I answered yes to lots of questions. I have lots of minor medical issues, but they are all weird things, and with EDS things like chest pain and palpitations are really common. I've had everything checked out, and they aren't life-threatening issues, just minor things you deal with, but they look scary on paper and there are a lot of them. Everyone in my family lives well into their 90s regardless of this, and the smoking and drinking they do. Anyway, all of this was really throwing the trainee off. She kept putting me on hold, asking her trainer questions and coming back on the line. It was clear that she needed to ask questions based upon an underwriting program and fill in the required computerized forms so they could be sent for medical review by someone qualified. She did not need to make any decisions, just fill out the forms. After 30 minutes of this, she put me on hold and consulted her trainer again. Except I wasn't on hold. I don't know what was said before to her trainer, but this time she chose to complain about the number of things that I said yes to, the massive problem list I have, and said that I'm probably going to die soon anyway. This happened pretty fast given the situation and the fact that I'd been trying to help her. I was pretty shocked at what I was hearing. After hearing her proclaim I was on the verge of death, I piped up and said, "I can hear you." So she hung up on me. I ended up calling my insurance company back to decline a quote, as I'd had enough for now. My carrier contacted the screening company and pulled the recordings and requested information about the incident. The trainee was fired before I had even called back. Unfortunately, the phone call is now being used for training purposes, with my information removed. Yay. I've posted this before, but it's long, so I'll just list the things he did. A 16-year-old lifeguard left his chair without another guard to go up. *PUSHED 2 kids in the pool for no reason. *JOKED with another guard to quick let's get her. Referring to a 12-year-old taking off her pants, so she was just in her bathing suit. The other guard was not amused. *APPROACHED another guard who just came from the shower, dressed but wrapped in her towel, tugged her towel, and said, "Show me what's under there." *CALLED mere aging bitch to the nearby campers, 9 to 12 years old, after I chewed him out for not being in chair and pushing kids on the pool deck. All of this happened within 20 minutes. He was fired on the spot, and all the campers who heard and saw what he did immediately came to myself and their team leaders to report him. No one thought he was funny, and I have no idea how he thought any of that was okay. More info for the curious. In days previous, he had a terrible habit, if being on his phone in chair, removing himself from chair, not doing any lifeguard chores, chatting with instructors and coaches while they're working, stuff like that. We didn't fire him sooner because 1. His mom is an intense lawyer, and 2. He technically has disabilities, lacking proper social etiquette, I guess, that would risk us discriminating and getting sued by aforementioned mother and or her lawyer friends. At this time, we were a poor rinky-dink club that couldn't afford that risk. We got bought by a larger company, so we probably would have a fighting chance now, but he's gone, so whatever lol. Because this was seen way more than I thought, I'm going to put my last 2 cents about his disability to say he did have a legitimate diagnosis. Just don't remember what it is. His mother was kind enough to provide us with all of his paperwork to prove his illness / prevent him from being fired. She's definitely the not my kid kind of mom, and didn't believe us when we called her about the less intense incidences before his fateful day. She also did all his communicating with his boss for him regarding his schedule, and he had a very strict schedule. Oh. He also made comments to the female lifeguards and instructors about how skinny they were and how they need to eat more because he could see their spine bumps when they bent over. Newspaper reporter here. One of my former colleagues was notoriously scatterbrained, and on at least 2 occasions she completely botched breaking news stories. One time, a well-known pizza restaurant in a small neighboring county burned down. We didn't find out about this until after she came into work. She lived in the same town as the pizza restaurant. She casually strolled in, got to work, and then my boss says something like, "Hey, they're saying that restaurant burned down." My coworker then says, "Oh, yeah, I heard about that too. I meant to tell you about it." Another time, a grain truck got into an accident on the highway. spilling grain and causing traffic on the 2-lane road to get extremely congested. Someone tipped us off to it, and as I was getting ready to head up there, she walks into work and says, "Oh, yeah, I drove past that when I was coming in. And you didn't think to call us and let us know?" And I didn't witness this, but another coworker of mine told me she completely fumbled covering a 4th of July parade. For those who aren't in the news industry, covering a 4th of July parade is about the most simple assignment you can ever get at a newspaper. Literally all you have to do is take pictures and talk to a couple people. She ended up quitting on the spot after coming into work one day after missing the deadline on a major project. My boss called her into a meeting and it got really heated. I don't know if she was going to be fired or if she was just going to discipline her, but it ended with her storming out of the office while another one of my bosses stood over her shoulder as she cleaned out her desk. Me. One of my first jobs was at a plant that made mining trucks. These things can be as big as a house. Very expensive. I was an expediter, so it was my job to monitor inventory and make sure our orders for parts were on track to be delivered on time and to resolve any issues if it turned out that something would be late from a supplier. We had a truck scheduled to leave the plant on a certain day. Part of the contract was that for every day the truck was late, my company had to pay a penalty of like $100K. So this was a huge deal. We had to watch this thing like a hawk to prevent any delays. Except I neglected to notice a bracket that was worth about $10 had run low and no order had been placed to replenish our stock. It was scheduled to leave our plant by the end of the day and it couldn't because we didn't have a $10 bracket. And it was only reported to me at the end of my workday because it's a simple install that should only take a few minutes at the end of the line to do. I called my usual emergency suppliers and had to beg one to get their guys to stay late to give us an order so we could attach whatever this part was onto our truck so it didn't cost us $100K. We paid triple what we normally did, but the bracket came in within a couple of hours and the truck was able to leave the plant in time to make the delivery deadline. It was a really good lesson in never neglecting the small stuff. That was about 15 years ago and I'm no longer in that industry, but it's a lesson I have carried over to all the jobs I have had since. My very first job was at a restaurant and I worked with my ex-boyfriend. We were civil, for the most part. He was an asshole, and he got his younger cousin a job there. Well, his younger cousin was a total shit disturber and pissed off just about everyone within the first week of working there. Keep in mind this kid is like all of 15. I worked up front in the restaurant, and he was dish pig. Anytime anyone was in the back and goofing off while working, this kid had to get in the middle of it, and he didn't know how to properly joke with people without it too far or being a total asshole and offending everyone. Eventually it got to the point where people would straight up yell at him and tell him to his face that he should be fired because 1. He was shit at his job, 2. He was rude and kept wanting to play this "I'm cool I don't care" card on everyone, and 3. He was not mature enough for a job there. One day he was taking the hose in the back that you spray the dishes down with and started spraying people as they walked by the dish pit window. He started doing it to a server as a joke and he laughed it off, but he kept doing it over and over, even though he was told to stop more than once. Eventually I walked by and he sprayed me and I screamed cause it startled me and his server saw and just flipped on him. He had enough of his shit, yelled at him, and made him apologize to me. Most sheepish apology I've ever gotten, and then told him he was complaining about him and his shit work at the restaurant. And I shit you, not within a week of that happening he was fired. Kid lasted maybe 2 weeks. By that point I think this guy's complaint was the nail in the coffin, because I know just about everyone complained about him. TLTR. 15-year shit gets fired after 2 weeks for being a shit disturber and horrible at his job. The manager at the restaurant I was working at told this party of 8 that the reason their food was taking so long was because their server didn't enter in the order right away / correctly. The server was actually the daughter / sister of the men of the party of 8. The party told the server what the manager said, and she said there was no way it was her fault, that the kitchen was backed up hella. The party asked for the manager to come out, but he sent out another manager cause he's a little bitch. They asked for that specific manager to come out. The manager hid in the kitchen, so eventually a few of the brothers walked into the kitchen to confront him, and they tore him a new asshole. The following day, someone from corporate came and stayed for a month or two, and she grilled this manager's ass every day about all the shit he was doing wrong. It was so satisfying to see this all go down. There was 2 straight months where all the staff was sick. It got so bad that too many people were calling out, and the restaurant was severely understaffed. The managers said we couldn't call out unless we had a doctor's note, but as a server W/O insurance, there's no way in hell I'm paying over $100 to be told I have the flu and to wait it out. A lot of us had this mentality. WELLL shit got critical. Servers were throwing up in the back. A lot of us needed constant breaks because we felt like passing out, etc. I showed up to my shift one day, sick as hell, and I knew I had bronchitis because I've had it so many times. I asked the manager to let me go home. I was practically begging with tears in my eyes, and he told me to suck it the fuck up, and I snapped. I went out onto the floor, and sure enough, I was at a party of like 6 to 8 people. I walked up to this table, looked this white mom with the "can I speak to the manager" haircut in the face, and said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to put you in this position, but I feel like I have no other choice but to tell you that I have been sick for a week and my manager refuses to let me go home. If I were you, I would not want to be served by someone who has the flu." She asked for the manager, and I was sent home immediately. I went to urgent care, got diagnosed with bronchitis, got a doctor's note, came back to the restaurant like 5 hours later, and handed in my doctor's note. I then went home and wrote a very detailed email to corporate with names, dates, the throw up incidents in the kitchen, the whole enchilada. The following week, a whole group from corporate came to the restaurant, rented out the venue of the hotel down the street, and had a week-long training seminar thing about this. Corporate basically said that we had rights, and what happened was inexcusable, and all this other bullshit. We were all paid generously to attend this training seminar. I made like $3 to $4 an hour as a server. The seminar paid us like $15 x 20 hours, even though we only had to go to 2 4-hour meetings that week. A grad student was invited into a professor's office for a meeting and was left alone for a moment. There was a pile of cumulative exams on the professor's desk that had just been graded. These are subject exams for grad students, wickedly difficult, and you need to pass 4 to continue in the program. This jackass decided he'd take a look at the stack of exams. Then, upon finding that some of his fellow students did poorly, he took pictures of their grades so he could use them to ridicule them and pass the results around the department. This was a big deal because numerical grades aren't ever given out for these exams, only pass/fail, and also it's a pretty big FERPA violation to distribute others' personal academic information like that. He was found out almost as soon as he sent the pics around and was dismissed and forbidden from campus immediately. Someone else had to pack up his desk because they were that serious about him never setting foot in the building again. I was once a bank teller. One day, a guy comes in to pay off a line of credit that he shares with his son. Apparently, his son is a drug addict and ran the line of credit balance up to $10K, maximuming it out. The guy comes in, talks to my fellow teller, pays it off, and signs to close it out. He asked my coworker at least 3 times that it was closed. She assures him that it is. She is also addicted to her phone and loans most of her attention to it. Guy leaves. Several months later, the same guy comes in enraged with a line of credit bill. He comes to my window and explains the situation. He thought it was closed, It turns out that our bank's policy, not sure if this is universal, is that both he and his son have to sign off to close it out, unless there was some sort of special circumstances that never happened. Dude owed another $10k, because of course his son isn't going to sign off on closing it out if he can run up the balance again. He says he is going to sue. I point him in the direction of someone more qualified than me. My manager tells me he has a good case and will probably beat our corporate bank in court. I'm just a teller. Some days it's good to be on the bottom. Glad it wasn't me that messed it up. I used to work in a grocery store and I had an hour person repeatedly lose my doctor's note stating that I have Raynaud's syndrome and couldn't be in the freezer. I got a stack of them from the doc and would have to bring in a new one every few weeks. Finally, I had a department head fax a copy into corporate for me before dropping off yet another copy to our bitch. The next week the our bitch called me into her office and told me I was going to have to put the frozen load for bakery away. I told her I couldn't do it and I had a note on file. She told me she didn't have any paperwork on file for me and that she could make me do anything she wanted to. I called my department manager into the office and told him what she had said. He got corporate on the phone and asked if they had received the copy of my doctor's note detailing the fact that I had Raynaud's syndrome and had already previously gotten frostbite at work from being forced to be in the freezer when I wasn't supposed to be. They said they had it and he then told them what our bitch had said. He then handed our bitch the phone. She had to hold the phone about 1.5 feet away from her face because they were yelling at her so loud. It was one of the most satisfying days ever working there. She went on leave shortly after that and never came back, and the official story was that she was having health problems. Edit. Thanks so much for the silver. I work at a group home for people with mental and physical disabilities. Most of the residents cannot walk or even stand on their own, so staff will help them stand or hold onto them while they walk so they don't fall over. Well, I had one coworker that was stupid for multiple reasons, but this one takes the cake. She helped one of the residents stand up to use the restroom, had her put her hands on the handlebar attached to the bathroom, similar to a bathroom stall, and left to get things that the resident needed to take a shower. She left her standing there alone for a solid 3 or 4 minutes. Of course the resident fell and hit her head pretty good. Had to go to the hospital and get stitches. She ended up being fine afterwards. How on earth my coworker wasn't fired is completely beyond me. This one time I worked at a company who made shelter cloth, like for orchards. It was woven from plastic thread. There were these huge banks of needles that just ran and ran making these giant rolls of cloth. The night shift guy was pretty new, and the night shift was just him and the machine. It would take most of the shift to do a full roll with setup and takedown. The lunchroom was baffled because the production floor was pretty noisy, so the night shift guy basically just had to babysit the weaver all night and then change the rollout and set up for day shift. I came in early one morning because I wanted to pick up some gear I'd left in my locker, and I walk into the unholiest nightmare you have ever seen. A Gordian knot at least 30 foot high. The dude had sat there until like 2 AM, the darkest part of the night. Then he decided to smoke a joint in the lunchroom and had fallen asleep. He woke up hours later to the sound of the weaver smashing itself to pieces. One of the needle banks had moved during the night and he hadn't seen the warning indicator. So then it had worked its way loose, then snapped, then flipped over and snapped the one next to it. Then it had made hundreds and hundreds of meters of fucked up Frankenstein cloth with giant kilometer-long thread bunches. I walked into him screaming. He had woken up 15 minutes prior and had not got past freaking out. I could think clearer than him, so I went and got the big forklift and pulled this huge bird's nest off the machine. He took it way out back of the yard and hid it from view. Then we grabbed some spare needle banks and slammed them in and likewise hid the busted up ones in the dumpster. Then we started feeding in a new roll and just got the machine going again when the day shift came in. They were surprised that the night guy had got through the overpass materials so fast, but since it happened sometimes when the machine behaved, they didn't make a big deal. I went back to uni about 2 months later and never found out if the story continued. But the crazed look of the night shift guy screaming and holding his chest has stayed with me for 30 years. Someone was using a scissor lift to paint the inside wall of our warehouse. This warehouse area had in the past contained a small office which according to code required a sprinkler head inside the office. There was a long pipe extending down from the ceiling that now just had a sprinkler head pointed at the ground considering the office had been removed. The operator of the scissor lift did not realize this pipe was here and ran into it with the scissor lift. The pipe broke off in spectacular fashion, spewing disgusting 30-year-old black water all over the warehouse for an hour before anyone came in to help him considering it was the weekend. The water had pooled up so much it created a river which flowed directly into the office area. I was watching on the cameras since I was at home far from the warehouse. The look on the guy's face was heartbreaking. I do remember the CEO of the company being there in his weekend attire helping clean up. He walked into the office area where the guy who broke the sprinkler was. I could see the dread on his face. Almost brought a tear to my eye when I saw the CEO give him a pat on the back and a hug. That place was full of wild stories like this. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.